Welcome to the show, Fuck Loneliness. I'm your host, Sharon Pieczenik. And in each episode, I invite a guest on and we discuss the nature of loneliness. Let's hop right into it. Hi, Lynn. Thanks for coming to the show. I just wanted to introduce you all to everyone and everyone to you. Your name is Lynn Dutrow, and you are a coach and counselor, and you have been focusing on anxiety. So I wanted to speak with you around anxiety and loneliness.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me on, Sharon.
Yeah, absolutely. So your website is awesome. I know you're updating it, but I love the one you have. And the first thing it says on the website is, what would anti-anxiety say to your voice of doubt? For starters, she would say, bite me.
Yes.
I love that. Tell me more. That's hilarious.
Yeah. So humor is a big part of what I have found to be really helpful in helping in working with people who have anxiety. We get very intense. We get very over focused, and so using humor it's an imperative. And the more that I worked exclusively with people with anxiety, that's when I found that the humor had to come in. And so the bite me is one of the ways I work with people, is helping them to understand you have to talk back to the anxiety. The anxiety is not in charge in the way that it presents itself as being in charge.
Right. Yeah. And I want to touch on that, the anxiety not being in charge, because with anxiety and loneliness, at least for me, when I feel extreme pangs of loneliness, I feel like, and my thoughts are, this is going to last forever.
Yes.
And I'm going to be alone and lonely forever.
Yes. And that's exactly. So if you think of anxiety as a protector, on some level, that's what it's doing. It wants to keep you alive. It's all tied into our survival, the fight or flight.
Right.
The tricky part is that it overdoes its job. And so what you're talking about when you say that it's going to last forever, that's what we would call a cognitive distortion. I'll get all technical.
Yeah. Ooh, do it.
It's a cognitive distortion of overgeneralization. Okay, and that's what we do when we're in the throes of an overwhelming emotion, like feeling lonely, feeling anxious about being lonely, feeling it about future events. We only use a very small part of our brain. We're not accessing all of our resources. You're not in that moment accessing the fact that your logical mind knows it's not going to be forever.
Yeah.
Your core self, what I call your inner CEO, the leader in there, it knows that it's not forever. But in that moment, you're not connected to that part of you. You're not connected to that ability to access your resources.
No, absolutely. I'm just
so it feels right. It feels very real in that moment. And that's where we do the work around understanding that our thoughts and our feelings are not facts. We treat them that way. We treat them as if, they're the commandments, they're an important, they're your tax document. There's something like really important. And it's like, no, they're just thoughts.
That's sorry to cut you off. I was just thinking that that's such an interesting thing to almost have to unlearn. I feel like at some point we're taught, oh no, our thoughts and feelings are real. And then we have to somehow unlearn that they're just a ticker tape of noise.
Yeah, exactly. So the key is discerning the difference between the ones that are signals and the ones, exactly like you said, that are noise. Is learning how that everyone that comes in is not as valid as everyone that comes in.
How do you decipher that? That's really difficult.
It is difficult. That's the deeper work. That's why, I tell people that on some level, I'd love to just be able to take people's heads and, pop them up like in a cartoon and just pour everything in and say, we're done.
Yes.
But yes, it is. It's the deeper work of beginning. I don't usually use the word trust, but I know that that's a word that people can relate to.
Right.
But really some of this is about learning to trust yourself, learning to trust and discern the difference between the voices of like the protectors, like anxiety, and anxiety definitely uses loneliness. We'll come back around to that. Um, recognizing the difference between the voices, recognizing that your inner CEO is like a leader that's going to sit back and let the other ones, yeah at you.
Right.
And so how do you begin to connect and trust, which is the inner voice? And what I tell people in the beginning is, if it's coming from a place of fear, it's probably anxiety, and it's probably yanking your chain.
Okay.
Yeah. We want to, unless it's an immediate that you are in danger right in this immediate moment. And when I say danger, I mean life or death.
Right.
It's probably your anxiety. And this is how I conceptualize this for people. You know how border collies are famous for being very intelligent, but very busy. And so if they're going to protect a flock of sheep, they're going to make the sheep stay in one area and they're going to run circles around it.
Yeah.
Because in their mind, it's, you have to stay in this place and I have to keep my eye on you and I have to be right here and I have to isolate you. I have to, make you like this.
Mm-hmm.
But like a sheepdog or a German shepherd, they're going to sit up, remember the Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote cartoons. There was a sheepdog was one of the characters, and he would just sit up on like this ledge and the sheep could just wander wherever. They're fine, because he trusted that he was watching, and if something bad was going to happen, he was okay. Like he could it was a bigger area. So for people with anxiety, their anxiety is more like a border collie. It's protecting, and it wants to keep you, it makes its job easier if you don't take risks, if you don't go do things, if you don't socialize.
Right.
And so what ends up happening is loneliness is a what do I want to call it? Like I can't think of what, the collateral damage.
Right.
Of the fact that for people who tend to be more anxious, that's the collateral damage, is feeling lonely, because your anxiety is telling you it's too dangerous to go out. It's too
right.
Being connected is vulnerable. Don't be vulnerable.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
So that's where we have to recognize what anxiety is doing and thank it for its job. Thank you for protecting me. However, let's work out a deal here. Like, give me a signal if I'm actually in danger. And otherwise, how about you support me in, living my life?
Right. So actually that act of literally talking back to the emotion is what you'd suggest.
Yeah. One of the most powerful processes in the work that I do, which is identify your anxiety, your inner critic, whatever you want to call it, and actually put a face to it. So is it like Miranda Priestley? That's the character that Meryl Streep played in The Devil Wears Prada.
Okay.
Like,
Yes,
the ultimate bitch boss.
Right.
The ultimate critical. Or someone like Martha Stewart. People tend to see her as critical, a perfectionist. For the guys, Gordon Ramsay, the chef that gets in your face, right? Very critical. So once you put a face to it, and clients with dealing with anxiety, I actually have a client that sent me a like a bobblehead of Slimer from Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
Because that's that's how he conceptualized how his anxiety treated him.
Yeah.
Okay. And so you conceptualize, and then you want to know the backstory. Like, what's the backstory? Because when you start to get the backstory of your anxiety, that's when you start to go, wait a minute, my anxiety, my inner critic is not as powerful. It's not actually a leader. It's more of a micromanager. So yes, the talking back by having by anthropomorphizing. I had to use that word a lot when I first started using it.
Yeah.
By putting human characteristics to the anxiety, to the doubt, to whatever inner voice you have that's trying to protect you but overdoing its job,
Right.
you can then begin the process of connecting to your inner CEO and saying, wait a minute, I see what's going on here. I
Right.
know who you are. It's like taking the curtain and pulling it back on the Wizard of Oz.
So are the 3 steps, you give it an image, you give it an actual image,
Mhm.
you think about the backstory where it's coming from, and then you talk back to it. You
Yeah.
reframe the situation.
Yes, yes. And the key in there is that you are willing to feel your feelings.
Okay, that's where we had discussed this actually on the phone the other day, and I was like, I hate that. I absolutely hate that.
All of my clients hate that part. That's the part when I finally get to that part, I'm like, okay, this is the part where you're going to want to run screaming from the room,
Yeah.
because this is the part, and especially I find high achievers in particular, overachievers, really have done a good job of disconnecting.
Mm,
They start to feel the feelings that are overwhelming. It's like, avoid at all costs. And that's one of the driving factors with anxiety, fear in general, is we don't want to be uncomfortable. And our anxiety tells us that the 2 main things are to be certain
yeah.
and to be comfortable.
Right.
And the reality is they're both illusions.
Yeah.
I'm getting a big ass dose of that right now during this COVID-19, everybody stay at home and whatever, is that we want to be certain. We
Right.
want to know how this is going to play out. And the reality is, and the reality has always been, that's just an illusion that makes us feel better.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I absolutely detest that feeling of uncertainty and fear and unknowing, the visceral response in my stomach, the butterflies, the tightness in my stomach, in my throat. I
Yes.
hate it. I try and avoid it at all costs. And I remember Tara Brach once saying, what you resist persists. And
Absolutely.
so with my loneliness these days, literally my heart feels like it's breaking. And so I just sob and I try and let myself sob. And then it seems like the emotion moves
Yes.
faster than
Exactly.
if I push it away.
And exactly. And that's what I work with clients, is the willingness to feel the feeling. The
Yeah,
willingness
that's
to,
right.
yeah.
In yoga, you go into pigeon pose and it's impossible and a hip opener and it kills. And they're always like, just breathe through it because
Yes.
it'll help you with the discomfort of life and
Yes.
breathing through it. It's
Yes.
like, oh, this is terrible.
Yeah. Yeah. It is sucks. And it does. And I'm not lying. I'm not going to lie to people. I'm not going to say, and I think that's where the way that I approach working with people, most of the time I get clients who may or may not have, uh, tried some self-help stuff, or, so meditation, or working with another therapist who tells them, well, learn how to breathe. And
Yeah.
100% of the time when I say to people, has anybody ever just told you to calm down or to just breathe? And they're like, yes. And I'm like, and did you really want to punch them in the face? And 100% of the time, yes, is the
Yeah.
answer. And it's not that breathing and it's not that meditation aren't helpful, but until you understand why you're doing it, it's more like trying to put a Band-Aid on, you're gushing and you're
Hmm.
trying to stick a Band-Aid on it. The
Right.
Band-Aid's only helpful if you can figure out how to deal with and staunch the blood and the wound or whatever. So there's a time and a place for dealing with the anxiety, the loneliness, all the feelings, but understanding where it's coming from, I think, is the step that's so often left out.
Giving the face the emotion, talking back to it, reframing it is the goal, that you'll never feel lonely again, or more that you can handle lonely.
Yes. Number 2.
Number 2.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And that's the goal with anything. Clients walk into my office and say, I want the anxiety to go away. I hate it. I want to get rid of it. And I'm like, okay, like if your anxiety were a person and you don't have a choice, it's kind of like, remember the movie The Parent Trap, where these twins, and it turns out they were separated by their parents at birth because their parents, got divorced, and they end up at this camp, and they're at each other. They can't quite figure it out. And so the best thing that the camp counselors do is they throw them into a cabin by themselves and say, work it out.
Right.
So it's kind of like that. Like, you don't have a choice. Your anxiety is there. Your critic is there. The internal family members, they're all there. And you don't get to off them. But think about how they feel if they know you're plotting. Do you think they're going to be super cooperative with you?
Right.
No, they're going to be assholes. So, right. So it is about learning how to say, okay, this is what I have to work with. So how do we work better as a team?
Okay.
How do I make my anxiety into a team member? How do I make the loneliness into a team member? How do I turn it into a superpower?
Right.
Because ultimately that's where all of this comes from. We have gotten so caught up as a society in being certain, being comfortable, being positive all the time.
Right.
Okay, that's not really how this works.
Yeah.
I had a client the other day, and he's like, I have this dark side, and I'm really, frustrated, and I'm scared, and I don't know if I want, and I'm like, embrace the dark side.
Right. Yeah.
That's the important part, is to embrace the feelings, not avoid them. But like you said, when you embrace them, when you hug them, when you actually, bottom line, when you love up on your dark side, the emotions you don't like, they evolve, they change, and they can become, because when you're not afraid of them, when you can say to, you're having a panic attack, and instead of like, oh my God, I'm going to die, hey, bring it on, I got things to do, can we get this over with now?
Right. It's a total mind shift.
Total mind shift. It's all about when we fight with the emotions like anxiety or loneliness, we feed them. They just get bigger and scarier. So we have to stop feeding them, and reassurance feeds them.
Right.
Which seems counterintuitive, but that's the one thing about all of this, is it's very paradoxical. But when we can get to the place where we want to feel anxious, where we want to feel lonely, then those protectors go, I got nothing. I don't know what to do. Like, you're telling me you want this shit. Now, what do I do now? Like, this isn't working anymore.
I have no way to scare you into submission anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I'm curious for yourself, because I'm just always interested with people's personal experiences. What is your relationship with loneliness, if you have one, if you don't have one?
So interestingly enough, being this social distancing, this physical distancing, I think is really, it's very eye-opening to test out theories. And so I had always said, so my Myers-Briggs personality is INFJ. So and when we're talking loneliness, I would say that one of the main parts of that would be the introvert versus extrovert.
Okay.
So a real short version of that is, people who tend to be more introverted charge their batteries by being in the quiet, being by themselves. We process everything in our heads. I love being in my head. I have the best conversations there. Versus people who are extroverted, you get your battery charged by being around other people and the interactions.
Right.
So right now, people who are more extroverted are having more difficulty feeling lonely, feeling isolated, all of that. And as an INFJ, which is one of the smallest percentages of the population personality-wise, I'm happy as a clam.
Oh, wow.
If anything, I would really like it if the other two members of my family would leave more often.
Oh my goodness.
Okay. Because I can go much longer without interacting with other people than the average person.
Right.
And having to do it has played out that yes, This
Yeah.
is definitely, where I am and how I am. What's interesting for me is that I am more likely to feel lonely when I'm in a group of people, m- primarily like more extroverted people. So there's a
Mm,
lot of small talk. There's a lot of, you know,
right.
yeah, small talk. We'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
And so to me, I can feel more lonely in a group of people than I do when I'm by myself. So to me, my experience is loneliness is more of a state of mind.
Yeah.
We want to think of it as it all being very external.
Right. Yeah.
Loneliness is about being alone, and we know that that is not true.
Right.
And like I said, I feel like that's really playing out right now.
Yeah, I took at your suggestion and I took the 16 personalities quiz
Hmm.
and was very surprised.
Hmm.
I came out as an ESFP
Ah,
dash T,
yes.
which is an entertainer.
Yes.
And it's 61% extroverted, 39% introverted. And
Hmm.
I do find myself often walking this line between
Hmm.
definitely needing people around for energy, but then if there's too many people around, like bars or nightclubs or things like that, I don't like that.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So yeah, so that would be. I find knowing your Myers Briggs to be very enlightening. To and very often, um, and the 16 personality is interesting because it has that extra piece, the turbulent. I work with a lot of people with the turbulent energy, and that's where I think the anxiety, can
Mhm.
really play in uh,
Right.
to that aspect of it.
And
Mm.
I wonder if for me that the entertainer turbulent, what they said was some of it it didn't resonate, some of it did resonate, but one sentence at the end that stood out was this type of person needs freedom, novelty, and above all else, human contact. And I
Yeah.
was just like, whoosh,
Yes.
that is me to a T on all three accounts.
Yes.
And I have built a lifestyle where I am often alone.
Mhm.
And that is why I think I have like insane amounts of loneliness on and off
Yeah.
because I'm inherently a person who, above all else, needs human contact.
Yes. Yes. And so that's what I find is when I have clients do that test, like you said, the whoosh, the light bulb, the aha moment. And sometimes I have it the opposite. People who think that they're more extroverted because they've just um, again created a lifestyle based on what they thought they were supposed to do,
Yeah.
and they get the relief of, oh, like I actually, this is why I'm so tired all the time, this is why it's so hard to keep this up, and starting to make the shifts. So for you, I want you to check back in with me because I want to know what you find yourself uh, doing
Yeah.
to shift that, and then
Right.
how the loneliness um, shifts based on
Yeah.
how change some of the things in your lifestyle. But what I find, what I would be curious about is, did your anxiety drive you, are there things about your anxiety that, because that's where I find that one of the key pieces is our anxiety tells us to do something opposite of what is actually in our nature, in our best
Ooh.
interest,
Yeah.
because again, it's trying to protect you. So it's saying, oh, you got to do this because this is what, this is, but it really, all it's doing is it just wants to make its own job easier.
I think I want to try this. We'll see how it goes. What would be one statement that you would like people to say to loneliness when they're talking back to it?
Oh, loneliness. Hey, you showed up again. Nice to see you. What, let's have a conversation. What are you trying to tell me?
Okay. I
What's
love
the
it.
message I can get? And let's chat.
Oh, I love it. So invite it in for a cup of tea, really.
Yes, exactly. Not coffee. Coffee probably won't, too much caffeine in the coffee. Uh, but yeah, some tea.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you so much, Lynn. I
You're
really
welcome.
appreciate this talk, and we'll see you online.
All right, sounds good.
Bye.
Take care.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of Fuck Loneliness. I'm your host, Sharon Pieczenik. And if you have any questions or comments, please email me at fckloneliness@gmail.com. I look forward to having you with me at the next episode.